Hello and welcome to the That's So Craven podcast. We now have a video intro, so that's a bit of a surprise. I had no idea what was going on there. I was fully invoking the millennial pause, but here we are. I have a couple of people with me today to talk about the absolute bore draw that we had. But firstly and most importantly, I have a quality German lager. For those of you who are listening, I'm going to ruin your eardrums right now, but it's called the Tegernsee Hells. Should be pretty decent. But the beer can't talk. I can. And I have two more people who can as well. First of all, I have Dave at Crave, Dave the Brave, Dave who's done a shave, at least on the top half of his head. Dave, how are you?
Yeah, well, I'm quite glad that the intro has actually been more interesting than the game on Saturday. So if this is anything to go by, the show's going to be much better than I was expecting. So well done, Mark. It's great to be here. And let's get stuck into it.
100%. I mean, that's a pretty low bar for those of you who are watching. I honestly believe it was diabolical, as Billy Butcher would put it in the show The Boys. But not only do I have Dave, but I have a man of many colors. He wears red socks. He visits the Green Monster in Fenway Park, but he always be black and white. Modus, Mike of the United States, because we have two Mikes. Mike Levy, how are you?
I'm all right. And I love that you did some basic research on Boston, but I also love even more the German beer in honor of our German shot stopper who saved us a point. So well done there, Mark, tying it all together, your alcoholism into the purposes of this podcast.
We might as well get some good out of it, right?
Yeah. You do know that his name's Mike
The only
Levy,
good,
though, right?
you might say.
Levy, I'll let him correct me. That Mike is not shy of confidence, as our listeners know. But let's get right into it. Fulham Brentford. I was hoping it would be a game with a bit of bite to it. It was also my first time at the G-Tech. I don't know if you gentlemen have been, but interesting stadium. I'll leave it at that.
Shit stadium.
The different colored chairs, the screens that are oddly positioned at different heights. I don't even know what's going on there. It's effectively the opposite of symmetrical. But anyway, let's get into the lineups. Let's get through the game, and then we can talk about a few more interesting things we have on the agenda. The lineups, I don't know what I was expecting, to be honest. And I'll throw to Mike first. But there were a couple of names that we weren't expecting to see. There was a couple of names I was expecting to see, if I can get my words out. Berger was not on there. How did that make you feel, Mike?
It made my heart sing. I'll be really, really honest. I don't know what made me happier, seeing TC in the starting 11 or not seeing Berger in the starting 11. But it just made my heart sing.
Absolutely. And a few other names as well. I think we did understand that Kevin and Tete would be out. And so Castagne's been filling in as a deputy. But I have to admit, looking at Brentford's lineup, they were missing a few players as well. Rico Henry, Fabio Carvalho, so no last-minute heartbreak for us like they almost had. I believe it was last season, Dave. But when we're looking at who they bring to the table against us, and what really scares me, we kind of know how Brentford are going to play. But one thing I didn't really realize was just how fast a great number of their players are. I think Schade is one of the fastest players on the pitch. Thiago is still up there. They had an interesting little statistic. 6 of their players were faster than the average Premier League top speed. So I guess they got the average speed out of all the different teams and calculated it that way. But 6 players are faster than the average Premier League top speed. Schade versus Castagne, did that worry you a little bit, or were there other players that you were sort of looking out for on the Brentford side?
Is that to me, Mark?
To you, Dave.
Well, I to be honest, I didn't know that fact. You've done your research on Brentford, that's quite interesting. I think for me, I just see them as kind of like a powerful, physical, direct team, which is very much the trend, isn't it, in the Premier League this season? Strong from set plays. Lured long balls up to Thiago, seems to work for them. We, on the other hand, quite like to, play quite pretty football, patient build-up play, and seem to have forgotten how to attack recently, but we'll come on to that. No, I think Thiago was the one that was obviously I was thinking about before the game, because he's just on fire. Just he gets, they create a lot of chances for him. A point I'll come back to, and they seem to, he really knows where the back of the net is, and to score 21 goals in a Premier League season is phenomenal. So fair play to him. He was the kind of standout, but I know they've got a lot of solid players throughout the team. Collins and at centre half, and Kelleher in goal, I knew's been pretty good. So fair play to them. They've built a decent squad there, and their style of football's very on trend.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah, Mark,
agree.
I have to ask. Mark, you're moderating, but I have to ask you today really quickly the two things. Number one, you asked about Castagna versus Sade, and I have to ask, who in the Premier League do you feel comfortable with Castagna against? Like, are you not concerned about the Castagna matchup with
Ashley Barnes?
Think he plays through the middle. Not sure he plays out on the wing. Try again.
But if he ever floated out to the wing, I think Castagna could do it.
No, then he'd do the Mitrovic thing and he'd out jump him. But I do think we have to address really quickly, since I apparently called you out on this last week. How was your seat at Brentford?
Oh, my seat was lovely. I was next to a few other people that were doing the Riverside run with me, proudly sponsored by Buxton. Really proud to say we raised a good amount of money. We raised £650. Goes towards young people who basically, need after-school activities. Goes towards those with disabilities. So really, really pleased with that. Terrible stadium, though. Like I said, bad beer. Kind of felt like a library. Very, very quiet. The Fulham faithful were doing themselves proud. We were standing up all game. We were singing, but not a whole lot to sing about. There was one fantastic save in the game, and to be fair, you know what? I'm not going to hog the limelight. I know I'm hosting, but I'm not going to hog the limelight. Maybe we're jumping ahead a little bit, but we did see a couple of players out there. I think that did all right. Dave, to you first. Do you have anyone in mind that, even though by and large it was a pretty horrific match, was there anyone that you're pleased to see, and anyone that you think walked away with some sort of shred of credibility after that showing?
I was pleased to see Lukic back in the team. I thought he was really important for this one. I know he got booked after about 5 minutes, but he still provided what you'd expect from Lukic, which is a lot of energy, and he's quite tenacious and gets stuck in. So I think it was great to see him. Like Mike, it's always nice to see a little TC cameo. So that was nice to see. Other than that, I think it was pretty much team we more or less expected, other than the midfield. So it was, and I thought defensively, I was quite proud at the end of the game about how we kind of competed. I thought we competed really well to try and stop them. Of course, we had to get bailed out in the last minute by a spectacular save, but throughout the game, I thought we did quite a good job of limiting their chances. So I thought that was the positive I took out of the game. And the negative, of course, was the fact that we just created next to nothing. A few half chances for Sessegnon, and that was about it. So it was that was, and actually in isolation, a point away at the G-Tech is fine. That's a fine result. But I think obviously we have to look at it over a period of time, and we certainly seem to have a problem scoring goals at the moment and creating actually meaningful chances. And we saw that at this very worst on Saturday. So that was the thing that kind of I thought was concerning more than anything else.
Let me put it to Mike next, because I think you raised a really good point. I think we've only scored against Burnley in our last 5 games. Now, specific to this match, Mike, in your opinion, is it that we lacked creativity and we weren't, on it that day? Or was it Brentford's defense that was really solid and sort of shut us down? Because I could see an argument for both, but I want your take on it.
It was really interesting because, and Dave, kind of what you mentioned before, I think if I had to pick any player that came out of here with a, as you said, shred of credibility, I think there were really only 3. And I think Lukic, it was great to see him back in the lineup, almost scoring, it looked like, for half a second. Although we shouldn't necessarily be relying on our center mids to do that. We know they don't score. I thought Kearney provided some nice, some nice momentum to the team and acted as the metronome that he has. And we know he's played well against Brentford in the past. And I thought Leno was the other one. I was pretty unimpressed with our attack, though. And it showed because we were crying out for some creativity. Iwobi, I think, has deputized really well in center mid this year. And I almost think that is now a better place for him to be, because we missed the creativity of somebody like, like a Chukwueze, somebody like a Bob, somebody like a Kevin from the start. I mean, it tells you when our two best chances, I think, of the entire game, and correct me if I'm wrong, were a Sessegnon, half chance, maybe three. Lukic almost made it onto a ball that was played in, and Harry Wilson getting wrong-footed. That I don't know if you guys listened to the commentary, or if you were, if Dave, you were at the match, but they said Harry Wilson's slightly weaker right foot, which just tells me that they do not watch Fulham ever. I have never seen him do much with his right foot in general, other than plant on it. And so it's one of those situations where I think we're a little devoid of creativity right now. We're incredibly predictable. If we're playing from the front foot, Wilson is fantastic. And I know, Dave, you talk about this a decent amount, and maybe this is our segue, that maybe the service isn't what Muniz needs, but there has been a direct correlation in our downturn in goals from when Raul has not been starting to Muniz. And I think we're either showing that, hey, we need to have an alternative plan for when we move on from Raul, or Raul is much more integral in the play than we have realized he is. And yes, he scores the penalties, but he also links the play in a way that I don't think Muniz is quite set up to do.
I just don't think it's his role. Muniz is more of a target man, number 9. And, to get the best out of him, you need to be able to create chances for him. I was thinking, we were discussing this on the Discord group after the game on Saturday.
Shout out to the Discord, by the way.
Yeah, and I can only remember, and this is crazy, I can only remember 3 chances since January that we've created for either of our strikers. I think the first was the header Raul scored against Chelsea from a Berger cross. Then there was a chance against Everton at home after that Raul put past the post, and he probably should have scored. And then there was a header against Burnley, which Muniz, I'd say maybe not should have scored, but definitely should have hit the target. And I can't think of any other times.
Can I add one more?
I
want to add one more. The penalty that Raul scores against Burnley is actually set up by a ball that goes over the top to him, that he earns the penalty.
You're right. You are right. That's 4. But even still, 4 chances for your 2 strikers. And I'm pretty sure there's not, there might be one more, but there's not been a lot more than that. The service to the 2 strikers has been appalling. And that's why I think, Muniz, by his own self, admitted himself that he's not fully fit. But I think he's getting a lot of flack for maybe that's a bit unfair. And that, part of the fact is we're not creating anything for him, giving him 0 service. And actually, I think Raul looks better because he's dropping in and linking up play, but he's not getting any service either. I think the big issue is we've seemed to have forgotten how to create high XG chances. Sorry to drop the XG bomb in for those who hate that little phrase, but it is true. We're not creating high XG chances at all. And that's a concern.
But one thing I will say there, and again, you talk about Raul dropping into the space, and I think that's great that he does it. We know Muniz is capable of doing that too. Remember, our goal of the season so far, the Josh King's first goal against Chelsea, is started by Muniz. And it's because he drops in and plays the ball into Berger, who then sets King away. Muniz is capable of dropping in. That's part of his role as a target man, is to drop into that space and link the play. And I think it's something that we're seeing is something that he's not fully grasped yet, that you wish you would learn from a master like Raul, of being able to get involved in the play even when he's not scoring goals. Don't get me wrong, there is a place for the type of poacher striker. Erling Haaland has shown us that. But at the end of the day, we are not Manchester City. We cannot play 10v11 for an entire game and wait for one guy to just kind of poach goals based on service. Even Mitrovic back in the day got involved in, whether it was the press, whether it was, linking up the play and getting these flick on headers. And we're just not seeing Muniz do that the same way he
I
used to.
think that's fair criticism, and I think his all-round play does need to step up a level. I think, of course, he's had an injury as well, and missed a lot of the season. He hasn't had the opportunity, really, as I said, to got himself on the score sheet yet and boost his confidence. So what you're saying is actually fair. We do need to see him drop in and be a bit more productive, and not just kind of stand by the centre back and wait for the chance to come. But on the flip side, I think what I'm really more concerned about is the fact that if you look at someone like Brentford, Thiago gets what? He gets minimum 1 or 2 chances a game. Even at the end of the game we've just seen, he got a great ball into the box where he was able to get a shot on target. And I just don't see either of our strikers being provided service like that. I just see overhit crosses and being stopped at the first man, and then not really a plan B, not really a secondary idea about how we might be able to break teams down and get shots away. And I think, I think fair comment. I think that there is more to come from Muniz there, but I think at the same time, it does concern me that neither of our strikers seem to be getting opportunities like I see some of our other competitive sides around us. You look at Beto as well, the amount of chances he's getting at the moment, and he's tucking them away. We are not doing that. We're not getting those chances, and I don't think that's all the strikers' faults.
That's very fair. I would want to play devil's advocate here. Obviously, they're not getting the chances. But it's interesting that Raul drops in and helps out, and Muniz doesn't. I had a guy absolutely ripping on Muniz for most of the match, fairly or unfairly, not helping out, not industrious enough, or not working hard enough. But I wonder if that's been coached. I wonder if they have different styles. Raul, you drop in deep, you link up play, you know what to do. Muniz, you need to stay up front. You need to occupy the center backs, right? Same thing we see with Berger. Berger never takes a shot. How many times have we seen him? He receives the ball from TC or someone else, edge of the box. He has 2 seconds to pull the trigger, and it goes out wide again and again. Deeply frustrating. But I do wonder, is that Muniz sort of being naive? I don't think he's a lazy player, but is he just not aware, or he's been told to stay up front? I think that's worth exploring. But another man I want to talk about, probably a very important man for us, and I'm going to pick on Dave here because I know Dave and I disagree on this individual.
Is this your nonsense take about Iwobi that you're going to start getting into now?
He had a horrific 44 minutes.
Did.
Please don't tell me. I feel like from January, we got a different Iwobi. We got an Iwobi that's more interested in his EP launch and bigging up his YouTube channel. I like the guy. I'm sure he's a good dude. Like I said, bags of talent, nephew of JJ Okocha, really cool guy, but I just don't see the work rate. Now, interestingly, why he was picked, obviously TC is picked for control, and why Iwobi was picked on the wing, other than he's a Marco Silva's, one of his golden boys, is because he is a strong player. And Silva mentioned this later. That's why he didn't start Bob or Chukwueze. He says Brentford are a physical team, a strong team. I need combative wingers. And Wilson perhaps less so. That's why Iwobi starts. But I don't know. What was your take on the first 40, 43, 44 minutes? Because I think I saw a lot of misplaced passes, and this isn't the Iwobi we started the season with.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And I don't think we've seen a bit of an inconsistent Iwobi since AFCON. I don't know if there's fatigue there. He's played a lot of football. And actually, maybe that's the reason why he's now injured, potentially for the rest of the season if it's a hamstring strain. Look, he had a bad game. It's not the first bad game he's had since AFCON. I'm not in your camp. We need to get rid of him because I still think he's, of the most kind of all of our players, he's one of the most creative and has been for like the last 2 or 3 seasons. Actually, we get more output of him than anyone else until Harry Wilson showed up this season. So I don't think his time is up just yet. And as Mike said earlier in the pod, I think, at centre midfield, I think that he's got a lot to offer us. But yeah, I think it's fair observation to say that he had a poor game on Saturday. He certainly didn't come out with, his just passing was off, and I just think he's just a little bit out of form.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, yeah, it's I know he has it with him. I just feel like we could be doing a little bit better there. But there you go. Mike, you want to be the tiebreaker? Thoughts on Iwobi? Well, maybe.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm in the Iwobi out camp per se, but he is somebody that I think we could definitely capitalize on value if it's there. I think he plays such an important role, and I think that's part of what we're missing with him. Is ultimately he needs to have that consistency in his role. He's been, as I said before, playing so well in the center mid, and I'm just really concerned that kind of moving him around, he is not as much of a Swiss Army knife as we like to believe he is.
Yeah, fair enough. He is talented, like I've said. Let's swiftly move on to the second half. I was hoping for some changes. We did get some changes eventually in Marco Silva fashion, but once again, like you guys said, probably Cesc had the best opportunities other than that weird Harry Wilson chance where I really thought, I know it's not on his wrong foot, but I really thought he would just go for it. He's always been hotshot Harry against Brentford, but honestly, I felt like I could be playing in goal instead of Kelleher, and probably we'd have about the same outcome because so many overhit passes. That's another one I want to pick on today. I'm sorry I'm being so negative. I shouldn't be so negative, but it was not a good game. Anderson, I know defensively we didn't let anything in, but he had some dodgy long balls as well. I mean, this is not the Anderson that we bought, right? This is not the Anderson that we wanted. I could see it. I respect the vision. I understand what we're trying to do, but he just felt a bit off it as well. And like I said, Kelleher was not really tested. I mean, 0 shots on goal. I mean, do you think Silva got the subs right in terms of freshening it up? Should he have been a little bit earlier? And we have a few more controversial points, but we'll get to them later. Let's just talk about the subs first. Mike, over to you first. Did Silva get the subs right? Would you have liked to see anyone else on? And should they have been on earlier, maybe?
Perhaps connection issue here with Mike. Do you want me to jump in?
Please.
Yeah, so I think, well, he was kind of forced into one, wasn't he? Obviously, just before half-time with Iwobi having to come off and Chukwueze coming on, which it was nice to see Chukwueze get some good minutes. I don't think he, had a massive impact, to be honest, but it was good to see him have minutes. And I think he's going to play an important role for the rest of the season now with Iwobi out. Other subs, I mean, you could argue, I suppose, that the introduction of Raul a bit earlier, I suppose, to see if that would make any difference. I don't think he did make a lot of difference when he did come on. He seemed to be playing centre midfield for most of it. But I don't blame him really when nothing's coming up the other end. No, I don't think particularly the in-game subs were terrible. And I think that, he held off bringing on King and Bob until late, very much for the reason you said at the beginning, is because Brentford are a physical side and didn't want us to get kind of outdone. And at the end of the game, we actually made those subs to try and create more attacking impetus and try and nick a result. So it was a bit of a gamble, and it didn't pay off. But we didn't lose the game. We managed to see it out thanks to Bernd Leno's fantastic save. But back on Anderson, just your point. Yeah, Anderson, I don't think he's having a good season at all. And I think I see why he's in a team. He can bring the ball out from the back. He can, play make from almost the defense, but I don't see it enough. I'm not seeing enough, completed passes, and it just concerns me a little bit, because as soon as you get Tete and Bassi out the team and he loses his stabilizers, the bike seems to fall over. So I think when he's on 125 grand a week and costing us 5 grand a year in amortized transfer fee, you might have to, if there's an offer comes in for him in the summer, we might have to take it, because that's a lot of money and I'm not sure we're getting full value for it.
Yeah, very fair. And I think if you're Diop, you're upset. And annoyingly, if you're Cuenca, you're upset as well, because, I mean, I don't think Cuenca's put much of a foot wrong. But yeah, Anderson, I can see what he brings, but he's just not bringing it. And speaking of a difference maker, before we get to the Berlin Wall himself, there was another man on the pitch who was dictating everything. His name was Paul Tierney. Now, I don't know if you saw the decisions, and I hate to talk about the ref. That's a lie. I love talking about the ref so I can rip on him. But, I mean, Mike, over to you. Some of the decisions, the 6-minute Lukic yellow followed by the, is it Ayer or Jensen or whoever else? I don't know. The mirror image of that foul 3 minutes later, that was just ignored. The Bassi hair pull, which is conscientious, and then the bloody the head injuries. I mean, yes, you have to take head injuries seriously, but like each time we're on a breakaway, a head injury, I have my tinfoil hat on, but tell me about that refereeing performance. Did it infuriate you as much as me?
I was pretty unimpressed by Paul Tierney. If I'm being really transparent, I think Lukic has started to develop a bit of the Palhinha and Mitrovic syndrome of his reputation is preceding him a little bit. And he is, kind of getting one strike and you're out at this point on a yellow. And I think that's something he's just going to have to deal with in his time. The one that really bothers me more than even the duplicate foul is the hair pull. We have heard about that so many times about how that's not something that you're allowed to do. It is so clear. The lack of review is so inconsistent and infuriating, not just from the referee's perspective, but also from a VAR perspective. How is this not something that we're actually looking at consistently? Drives me absolutely up a wall. And that if, somebody like, let's say, a Lukic did that, he's not only, getting a red, he's suspended for 3 matches on top of the red. Again, this is me with the tinfoil hat. How many times have we seen a player suspended since Mitrovic for coming up to a ref or putting a hand on the ref? 0. Mm-hmm. And we were supposed to be setting an example. We're not setting an example here. We're setting a convenient example of don't you do that, because then we'll have the story to go back to, because somehow big bad Fulham does it. I'm pretty disappointed, and I'm pretty frustrated by how people are deeming when it is appropriate and inappropriate to call things in a game.
Very fair. Look, it's always appropriate when it's your team, and it's when the team you're playing against, then it's super inappropriate, right? It can be Bruno Fernandes shoving the linesman. It can be Martinelli shoving the referee. That's fine. That's part of the game. But when it's us, we draw the short straw. So that's a little painful. But let's talk about the one shining moment in the game that my heart was in my mouth. I mean, it almost seemed written in stars. 90 plus 5, a very good breakaway, an excellent cross into the box. One of those high XG chances that Dave was talking about. Dango Utara, good player from Bournemouth, now at Brentford. They shelled out a big amount of money for him. I think it was like 40 or something. Yeah. But Brentford know what they're doing when they recruit. They probably felt like they paid more than they wanted to, but and I think he doesn't strike it perfectly. It is within Leno's reach, but that reaction is pure instinct. It's incredible. And that was euphoric for me. I thought we were done, and the German wall shows up again. Mike, talk me through that. Like, did you think it was in, or did you have faith in the German stopper?
What a reflex save. It's a borderline hockey save. I think I heard somebody say it best, where you stick a hand out there and you hope it's in the right place. But it makes me laugh a little bit, because you think about some of the times that people have talked about, maybe Leno's losing it a little bit. Maybe he should have had a stronger hand on a couple goals earlier this season. And that's what we're looking for. I mean, that's an incredible play. It saves us a point. I'm not sure if this is where we want to transition to it, but because of that, almost all of the results actually went our way this weekend. Like, I know it feels pretty dire after watching that game, and we'll come on to what does Europe actually look like later. But if no one's looked, we are 3 points off of Chelsea in 6th. Like, that's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. So, in all honesty, it's not only the play of the game, it might be the play that defines our season. It's our opportunity to kick on from there. But wow, what a play to save our season. And yes, I know it was a crap game to watch, but it was honestly, like, in the context of things, that's a really good point.
I think in isolation, yes, but it's also how we got that point, right? And it wasn't like a hard-fought 2-2, a shining example of how competitive and incredible the Premier League was. It was a pretty dull affair, in my opinion, where Brentford probably should have edged it, but thanks to Leno, they didn't. Dave, can you take anything positive away from this game, which somehow we've managed to spend 29 minutes and 23 seconds talking about? But any positives before we can finally bury this and talk about more interesting stuff?
We didn't lose to Brentford. That's got to be the biggest positive of the day. So, I do always worry about this fixture, because I can't take losing to Brentford. So I'm pleased that we haven't. I'm pleased that we've made it, I think, 5 games unbeaten against them. And I was quite, as I said, I think I was quite proud of the fact that we have the effort of the team in, defensively to keep them out. And of course, there's loads of questions about the attack, which we've talked about. But I think I was quite proud of the fact that we put in the effort to try and keep them out and managed to get a draw out of it, even if it was a worldy save that really put the icing on the cake.
Yeah, very fair. Now, I've got a couple of my own questions before we move on to the pod questions. But just generally speaking, we know that we're toothless. I've written down, why are Fulham toothless? Brentford's defense, our quality, our motivation. I am going to bring up a name that I don't particularly like, but I know Skibby loves. His name is Andreas Pereira, our old number 10. As Dave kindly pointing out, a 66% pass completion rate, which puts him in the bottom 1%. But it felt like our attack was better under him. Call me crazy. I know he never scored a single set piece for us. I know he made a lot of Hollywood passes that were horrific. And I prefer ESR and King. I do. But for some reason, it's just right now it's not clicking. Over to you, Mike. Why do you think that is? Is it
first of all, crazy? I appreciate you kicking it to me, because I mean I need to calm you down. What I will say in Pereira's defense is I appreciated the industry, and I think that that's something we have really liked across the board when we've talked about players like Palhinha, players like Lukic, candidly, have had that industry and that drive and that gumption. Same with Pereira, unlike somebody like a Sander Berger, who again just kind of glides around, and it's I think that's where I get frustrated by him. Honestly, it's where I get frustrated with ESR a lot of the time too, is I just feel like he's kind of not making himself a part of the play. I do think that there's something to it, but I also think our fundamental attack has just changed. And again, I think this goes back to the comments on Muniz, and it's part of the reason I really do want to see more of Josh King, is just, especially in this last run out of, he loves to fly around. He loves to put pressure on people. He really does put in the work. And I'd love to see him with Raul, because you think about what Andreas did so well with somebody like Mitrovic up top, is he was essentially doing the press for Mitrovic, and Mitrovic would pick up the ball a little bit deeper and then link that play from there. I could see King doing something like that for a Raul. I haven't seen Muniz do it since he came back from his injury. And again, I want to give him time, because he's coming back from his injury and he's clearly low on confidence. He's clearly not there in terms of form right now. I want to see the King Raul, because we never really see the two of them together. And I'm curious as to why. Is it because somebody doesn't just hold that space up top? But that industry is what we are missing, and that creative spark, that I don't think that's a Andreas thing. I think that's more that we never really came back and replaced a Niskins Cabano once we let him go. We never up-leveled that section. And that's always been the thing that's frustrated me. And I think I want to believe Kevin's that guy. I thought it was Chukwueze early in the season. Something's clearly happened with Chukwueze since pretty much AFCON, and Skibby and I talked about this last week. I don't know if it's the number of games. I don't know if it's the traveling. I don't know if it's, what's been going on in his personal life. But he does not look the same player. And Bob, despite having some flashes, seems to be very concerned about playing within himself, and we need to get that pep kicked out of his system. But we're missing somebody to go after something. And it's where I thought King did this against Liverpool. He obviously did this for his goal against Burnley. I like that industry, and it's a little bit of that unpredictability that I think we're really missing here.
I want to give this to Dave, because I was going to ask you, Dave, about Bob and Chukwueze. I actually quite like Bob. I know we don't have the goals and assists for it yet, but industry, that word for me actually really resonates with Bob. He's a little guy, but he does hassle his man. He does stick close to him, and for me, he looks like he's working hard. I see from your facial expression, perhaps you disagree, but tell me about Bob and Chukwueze. What are your thoughts?
Well, Chukwueze, I'd like to, see have more opportunities, and I think he will now that Iwobi's out the side. I thought obviously before he went away to AFCON, he was, he just broken into the team. His numbers were great. He was getting goals and assists, and general play was excellent. And then coming back from AFCON, he didn't play at all, did he? In AFCON, they didn't play him, and I feel like he just lost a bit of momentum. And then he came back. He had the awful, tragic passing of his mother, a small injury, and he's really just been in and out of the team since. But I still think there's goals and assists in Chukwueze, and I think where we're lacking, that at the moment, I think he really needs to be back in the side. So I'm hoping that come Aston Villa on Saturday, he will be back in there. Bob, I think I'm struggling with Bob a bit. I don't think he's quite looked like the player I was hoping he would be when he joined, and I'm prepared to give him time. I think it might be one of those where it's going to take him until next season, after getting a full pre-season under his belt, to really kind of gel with the team and show us what he's capable of. But I think he's been very quiet, really, in the Premier League games I've seen him in so far. I do also believe that he is playing out of position. I think he would prefer to play on the right. But obviously Harry Wilson's there at the moment. Obviously Chuck would like to play on the right too. So we've got two players there that if Harry Wilson does leave, we don't need to replace. So that, that's something. But Mike alluded to it as well. I think we've missed Kevin a bit as well, just having that extra option. And particularly as he was just gathering pace, wasn't he? He was just starting to show what he's made of, and he took that injury. So I'm really fingers crossed that we're going to see him before the season's out, because I think that'll give us a boost.
I think so. He's back in training now, so I'm positive that something good will come out of it, and hopefully we'll see him for the last couple of games. So moving on to some questions now. The first one that we've put up on the screen from Colm, if you're listening, is the upcoming World Cup the reason why this season feels like we are just going through the motions? For some players, yes. For some players, no. That's my answer. I feel like Robinson, ever since his injury, he hasn't been 100%. He's probably got an eye on that World Cup, probably a vice captain. I wouldn't want to be injured for that, right? It's a home World Cup. He's a key part of the USMNT. I could understand why maybe he puts in 90% instead of 100. Raul, I think, continues to work his socks off. He just doesn't know how to not work his socks off, even though it's a host World Cup for him as well. But Mike, what are your thoughts on this? Do you see like some of our players perhaps holding back? I still think we give a lot.
I think we give a lot. I don't know if that's a fair assessment on Robinson about it being the World Cup specifically. I think that's more just coming back from an injury and not fully trusting your body, and that being a little bit, uncomfortable. I don't know if there's anyone who I would say isn't giving it all for Fulham. If you want to make the tough argument, it might have been the Nigerian boys for a little bit because they were still going to AFCON, still trying to qualify. But since they've gotten back, they've given everything. Maybe they've been tired, but I feel like they've given everything. If we want to say that this season has kind of felt like we're going through the motions, I think it's just been a long season, and it's been a weird season for us. We've had kind of the whole Marco saga has been almost different this time to a degree, where we were actually bad for a little bit. I think this was the first season where I've ever heard people call for Marco out in terms of specifically based on results on the pitch. And again, that was in December. That was so long ago. I think that saga has been exhausting. We're surprisingly, again, going back to the table, with the league being so bunched up, we're actually still within striking distance of things being meaningful, but we're not in the perils of kind of a relegation zone. And honestly, I think people are focused on other things. If we really talk about where things are, we're talking about Arsenal bottling the league potentially, which I'm not going to lie, makes my heart sing a little bit. We're talking about a big team is going to go down. And I don't think we've talked enough about this. And I know that this is a specific Fulham podcast, but any of the three teams that were really at risk to go down between Nottingham Forest, West Ham, or Tottenham going down is pretty significant that we're safe. Like, it doesn't feel like we're in a European race, but we actually are. The league is in a really weird spot at the top. It's bunched in the middle, and then the bottom, we're going to lose a really big club. And I think that, candidly, is probably a little more interesting. And then you look at the World Cup coming down the pike, which, by the way, I'll be at a couple games in Boston. Yeah, I can understand why it kind of feels like we're going through the motions a little bit.
It's a weird season, isn't it? And I need to get my 30-second eulogy rant in, or elegy, or whatever fancy word, soliloquy. Let's go with that. If we had Kieran Dewsbury Hall, I swear to God, we would be 6th or higher. If we had that hardworking, creative, visionary 8 who will be with us because he's what, 26, 27? Be with us for the next 3 or 4 seasons. Oh, man. I mean, Everton are doing so well, and credit for them for taking up that option, but I think that kills me. I think he would have been the difference for quite a few matches. But to your point, and I think this is one of the questions asked by Steve on our Discord, 4 of the last 5 seasons, we've dropped off a cliff. This shows a lack of leadership by Silva and the inability to get rid of favorites and bring in those who want to play. I'm giving this to Dave because I know Dave has strong opinions on Silva, but I do think that Steve has a point. I do think Silva has favorites. I think that's a very fair comment. And the drop-off is consistent. We don't know if it's tiredness. We don't know if just other teams have figured us out. But I would love a season where we not just start strong, but we finish strong too. But tell me about Silva. Tell me about favorites, and tell me about whether, because candidly, it does feel like we are second pick or he's negotiating with us. But what should we be doing? Should we be looking for a new manager, or should we be sort of very happy with how we've done so far and continue to place our faith in Silva, Dave?
Oh no, 100%. We should be continuing our faith in Silva, but that, you know, whether we will or not is a different story. I'm starting to get to the point now. I'm resigned that he probably will be leaving at the end of the season, but you never know. Where do I stand on that? I think that there's clearly has been some tactical, you know, I think selection issues really. I always feel that Silva does better when we've got a big injury crisis. Like through December, we had, you know, the bare bones of a squad and we picked up most of our results. And it feels like as soon as we've had a fully fit squad, he struggled a little bit game to game to find, you know, to pick the right players, in my opinion. So I think there's some criticism there, which is fair. But I think there's 2 ways of looking at it, really. And that is, one is, you know, you might be of the mindset that you're frustrated now that we haven't kicked on and we aren't, you know, there's a pattern in our play where we're drifting away at the end of the season, and there's a frustration about not making Europe. Or there's the mindset that, blimey, aren't we lucky that, you know, for the last 3 seasons straight, you know, we've managed to comfortably avoid being in the relegation battle and be safe by February. And I think that is a massive success in itself. And I think it's underappreciated now because it's become a little bit boring, a little bit stale. But I think that's an amazing job that Silva's doing that, because we are punching above our weight, really. If you look at things like our club's revenue, what we spend on wages, what we spend on transfer fees, you know, all of those things combined suggest we should be at, you know, the bottom half of the table. Yet every season we seem to be not fighting in the dogfight. So I'm appreciative of that with Marco, and I do think the root cause of why we haven't kicked on is that we don't invest properly. And you know, you mentioned last summer missing out on Dewsbury Hall. We knew we needed a centre midfielder, and we missed out on him, which Silva alluded to. We missed out on a proper striker. We panic brought in Kusi Asari on deadline day, you know, and all the other business was done too late. And we know Silva wants players in early to work them pre-season. So I think it needs to be. I think the biggest issue that I've got with the club is the fact that we're not proactive in recruitment. I see that with Claire, but I think that is more about the club than the manager. I think if we can back the manager properly, you know, do our scouting earlier, get our players in earlier, and I think then give Silva what he needs to start a season with. I think that, you know, we'll start the season stronger, and I think we'd have a better chance of pushing on. But we're not showing that ambition. And I think, you know, Marco's the highest points per game manager that we've had in Premier League history. I think we've only finished in the top half 5 times in Premier League history, and Marco did it last year. We've only qualified for Europe by a league position once in our Premier League history, so I'm not sure why that's now the expectation. I mean, I get for the ambition, I'm all for that, but I think the club needs to show that with better recruitment, more support for the manager. I think we should be more support, you know, appreciative of the job Marco's doing with limited resource.
Yeah, that's very fair. I'll get Mike's take on this in a second as well. But I think I would like to, at least devil's advocate, take that argument away from him, right? Give him 200 million over 2 seasons, right? And say we bought 5 of the players that we agreed with. It wasn't just purely Marco players or stats-based players or Tony players or whatever you want to call them. We've given you 2 good summers and you're still getting us 13th. You're not the manager to take us higher. But I would agree that he's done an amazing job for us just under Roy Hodgson with what I would consider bare bones. Now, could we do better? We probably could sell better. We probably could not just always go for established players until recently in the Premier League. Now we've gone for younger players and a better profile for SCR. But I agree that he's not perfect. I'm not saying he's better than Pep or Klopp or whatever else, but I think he's a top 8 manager, maybe even top 6. It's hard to make that determination when he really only gets maybe 1 player he wants a year. We need to be giving him 2 or 3 players that he wants a year and see how he does after 3 years.
It's not even
Mike,
so much that.
take.
It's about getting them in when he wants them in. You know, you can see how frustrated he is, and we're doing all our business on deadline day. He wants them in so he can prepare the team for the season. But we just have never really backed him that way. We've always, you know, taken too long with our negotiations, and and missed out on targets that have, been really important. That you mentioned it earlier, Dewsbury Hall, what a difference he'd have made. And then we were trying to resolve it in January, making bids for midfielders, Pepe, and couldn't get it done again. And I don't know, we need a better recruitment system in place. And I think that we would do better, but that's my opinion.
Yeah, I will say, and I think I'm going to wear Mark's favorite color for a second and put on some beige for a second. What I was going to say, I fully agree. We have not backed Marco to the hilt, and we need to do that. And only giving 1 to 2 targets a season is not how we show ambition, is not how we grow, no matter how much that you're spending on them. But especially with SCR coming in, we are staying fairly responsible. We're pushing right to the edge. And some of this is on Marco, candidly. We have had, what would we call it, 3 major sales since Marco took over of players. And I am stretching on the 3rd because obviously we know Mitrovic, we know Paulinho. Jay Stansfield is the 3rd, maybe. Like that, is that our 3rd biggest sale of the Marco era? We don't do well shifting players on. And so going back to one of the conversations we had earlier about, for example, in Iwobi, I understand that Iwobi is an integral part of the team. But there was a rumor that he was linked to Atletico Madrid for somewhere between 25 and 30 million in the offseason. That's money you have to take for a player like that. Like, we bought him for somewhere between 18 and 22, if I remember correctly. You have to be able to shift those players on to bring in the new big ambitious players. And I do like the perspective of, hey, we're going after the Kevins, we're going after the ESRs, players who are younger in profile, who have the opportunity to break out, and potentially for the Oscar Bobs to sell on for more money. I think that there is a piece of this, though, where some of those need more time. ESR is not one of them at this point, by the way, but the Bobs, the Kevins need a little bit more time.
Yeah.
But also, if we're going to bring in these players, you have to sell somebody to get out, like to fund this. We're not a club that has a gargantuan spaceship stadium that we can just, outdo everybody on this. We don't have, Visit Rwanda on our patch, on our sleeves or something that's going to pay us a crazy amount of money, or Etihad Airlines that's going to pay us a crazy amount of money. I do wish we'd funnel more money in through AEW, but that's a totally separate thing in my tinfoil hat. But at the end of the day, like, that is the strategy that we need to do. And, as much as I hate listening to people go on about Brentford and Brighton, I'm actually going to say Bournemouth for a second. Look at what they did in the offseason. They sold both of their center backs. Mid-season, they then sell their top player in Semenyo. And by the way, the season before all of that, they sold Solanke. They were able to cycle players out to bring in new ones. And I think there's a piece of this, and maybe this is just indicative of Marco as a whole, or at least how we as fans feel about Marco. I want Marco to stay. He's made us a stable club. He's made us fun to watch. He's made us hard to beat. But there's also a little bit of me that doesn't want him to go because I'm a little afraid of what happens afterwards. Because if you appoint the wrong manager, if you sign the wrong players, I don't want to get relegated. There was a question a few weeks ago of would you trade a trophy or European spots to get relegated a couple of years later? And I said no. I like the cup runs every year. I like the push every year. It's the hope that kills me ultimately, but I want to see that pushing through. And I think yes, Marco isn't perfect. And look, if he was perfect, he would be coaching candidly. I don't know how he is not linked to Newcastle right now, because you've seen what Eddie Howe has done and spent 700 million and still is behind us. He should absolutely be considered there. Not that I'm advocating for him to go anywhere, much less another black and white team in the Prem. But God, like, we need to be able to sell on players. We need to have a cohesive strategy, because I have a feeling that part of the reason that we take so long and negotiate and penny pinch on all of these targets that we're trying to get is because we are so close to that line, because we have sold, as I said, 3 players for double figures in Marco's tenure as manager.
The only thing I'd say on that, I was convinced by that argument last summer, that perhaps we were close with PSR, and that was the reason why we were having to negotiate so hard, and maybe that's why we couldn't get a midfielder and a striker. But then in January, we made up to, we bid 30 million for Pepe, we made 20 million bids for Arthur Atta, 27 million
PSR isn't the rule anymore.
No, I know, but it was in January. It was in January.
But we all knew that we were prepping for SCR. We don't care about PSR anymore. PSR.
But you could still get fined if you breach a PSR this year. The point I'm trying to make is, all I'm saying is, the point I'm trying to make is that that money was there last summer, because they tried to spend it in January to fix the problems that we created for ourselves. And they didn't manage to. They got Bob in, which was mainly to replace Adama, but the other two, the midfielder and the striker targets, they failed again to do. And then they've tried, obviously, more recently to try and get Pepe in earlier, and it's fallen apart again. So that's been a real saga. But
have we thought about as to why, though? Have we thought about maybe that the league accounts may shift over now that we've actually generated revenue from the Riverside stand, which may offset some of those PSR or SCR or whatever costs?
No, I do think we are, with the new SCR model, we're going to be up against it. And you're right, we do need to sell. We need to sell sensibly. We need to sell the kind of players where they're on high wages, which is a high fixed cost, and will go against us in SCR. And if, that's why I mentioned Anderson earlier. I mean, he's on 125 grand a week. He's our second biggest earner, but it's not just 125 grand a week. We're also paying off his transfer fee at £5 million a season. Right. if it comes in for him, and we can bring in someone who's 25, 26, lower wage, it makes a lot of sense to do that. So I think that's the kind of strategy I'd like to see as adults moving forward.
I'll take it one step further. I actually wouldn't necessarily. I don't know if we need to replace Anderson if we sold him, and it would be a big risk by the club, and it would be a big move. And Mark is going to spit in my face. But yes, I would love to see somebody like a Diffusion-Rolls get a shot in the team, because that is what these clubs do. That is what all of the other clubs in the league do, is they bet in their young talent. And we do ours once every other year. We get one token young player in, whether it's Sessegnon, whether it's Carvalho, now it's Josh King. I don't want to have to wait 2 years to figure out who the next guy coming through is. We should just be betting them in now.
Well, we might have to, because we might need those. They're going to be such lower wage. Lutz Vigil's not going to be in a big contract. So if he can be first team ready, that's going to be a big help for SCR, and give us more affordability to spend elsewhere. So you're right. I think we might see more youth players have contracts, but we definitely need to look at some of these high earners and elder players. Castagnier is another one, 75 grand a week he's taken, out, and he's not good enough. Can
I give you the weird one? Can I give the weird one? How have we never really seen any links to Leno? I'm just interested. Like, not that I'm saying to sell Leno, but how have we never seen a link to Leno? I feel like we paid $6 million for him. His wages are probably some of the highest in the squad.
135 grand a week.
Right. He's not only a player we could make a profit on. I'm confident we can make a profit on him. I'm not confident we can find a new keeper. That is a separate thing entirely. but that's a kind of player that I feel like we could shift on. And
Yeah,
I swear to God, though, if we brought in Ramsdale, I might just, I don't know what I'd do. I'd go cry for a while, I think. And
as my Arsenal friends used to
we're
call
building
him,
relegation FC.
they used to call him Hologramsdale, but I don't know. Leno, he's 35 now. Does anyone really want a 35-year-old goalkeeper? Maybe as a backup?
Yes. No, wait, what are we talking about? Goalkeepers are the ones who are supposed to age wonderful.
He's dropping off.
35
he's dropping off. He's not had a great season. I know he played for us on Saturday, but his form's not been fantastic. And for to be our highest earner, yeah.
I think there's an opportunity for us to sell on for him. I think we could get more than the $6 million that we overall paid for him. I think that will be a great return on investment. But all I'm saying is, for every one of the forced sales that we've done that has been successful in the Mitroviches or the Polinas, I think about, and I hate saying his name, I think about the Tosins, I think about the Matt O'Reillys, I think about the Carvalhos, who we sold for pennies on the dollar if we even sold them. And that is horrifying to me.
Yeah.
I do think, once again, tinfoil hat, and we'll wrap up because we are reaching the hour mark, but I do think Silva has a say in this. And as much as the Khans or Ali Mack or whoever it is blocks him on a deal and says, no, this is the price we're going to buy at. No, we're not going to buy yet. We can grind them down. We can save a couple of million. I think they probably give him the leeway to say, who don't you want to sell? And Marco probably hoards his players. I feel like he says, no, I need Reedy. I need TC. I need Berger. I need Castagna. Because we did see some speculative interest. We don't know if it's real or not, but we did see some interest in Berger. We did see some interest in Castagna. And Berger, I like. I probably would have kept him unless the price was ridiculous. Castagna, I absolutely would have moved. I feel like we can get a good replacement from our academy, if not the championship, for cheaper wages, like you said, and for a potential sell-on in the future.
We need a stronger cover for Tete anyway, because Tete's not got the capability to play all season. So you need a quality player to come in, and he's not doing that.
The other weird thing, by the way, our recruiting is surprisingly decent. Like, I know we always whinge about like not getting players in, but you see the Shirky deal, right? You see Cliver. These are players we've been linked to. And guess who is now player of the season for their club? Hayden Hackney. Like, and that doesn't even get into the Ademola Lookman got a Ballon d'Or shot. Like, we actually like scout pretty surprisingly well. We just don't get it over the line. And I have to think that, Mark, you have a point there that, yes, the club likes to grind people down, but I also think it's because Silva hoards the players and doesn't allow us to actually sell on players that we need to. And again, one of the deals that drives me absolutely crazy is the Muniz deal, because we owe his club in Brazil, I think it's 20% of the sell-on. So even that deal that Atalanta or that Leeds were offering us would have netted us less than 8 million.
I worked out it would have net. They offered about, I think, 35 million euros, and it would have netted about just over 20, which is hard to replace
before
a
the
striker.
sell-on.
Pardon?
Before
Because after we paid the sell-on fee and after we paid his remaining amortization from his transfer, which was only about 7 or 8 million. But that is not a lot of money for a striker. It would have been hard to replace him because he also had the lowest wages in the club at the time before he signed his new contract. So it was, that would have been really difficult to accept, because we would have had to have spent more money, a lot more money, which definitely doesn't appeal to the club. So. Yeah,
fair point. Let's finish with this last question, going full circle back to Brentford from Steve again. I have a little bit of color that's hopefully useful and interesting to add to this. But Steve says, is the fact that Brentford have done so well this season down to being managed by a set-piece coach? And why do we have no one who can lob in a throw? And I think that's Cess for the second part of your question, Steve. But so Brentford are really interesting at that they're owned by a self-made, basically gambling genius, stats genius. That's why they're recruiting so good. But Keith Edwards was the set-piece coach before Thomas Frank left. And then Thomas Frank left, Keith Edwards got promoted. It was a bit of a risk internally, right? But I think what's really interesting about set pieces and what's really interesting about Brentford's strategy is, yes, the league has gone that way. But if you think about it, they're minimizing the variables. The way Silva plays, it's beautiful, flowing footballs. We got overlaps, we got triangles. People are running in late. We're getting the balls in, right? But there's many pieces, there's many steps to that. And when it all comes together, it's this beautiful 10-step movement, and we got the ball in the back of the net. Brentford just send it long every time. Long throw, corner, long from Kelleher. Even if Thiago only wins 3 out of 10 flick-ons, then it goes to Shada or Otara. Then they can make something of it. I think they've done it in a very clever way where they minimize how much both sides can impact the game, and they're the ones sort of causing the attack from the throw-in or corner or goal kick or whatever have you. But I don't know. What do you guys take on that? Should we perhaps be a bit more direct? Because that seems to be really playing well, obviously, with the sprinting speeds that we mentioned earlier. But it's a very different style of football. One can say a basic style of football, but it is effective. Dave, you go first.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
I think when you're playing with Muniz, then you should go a bit more direct because you've got that physical presence up front. We haven't really adjusted how we play to Muniz from Real. So Muniz is pretty isolated up there. So yeah, I think to an extent, yes, it depending on the personnel you've got on the pitch. But in the original question Steve asked, I think he's right. I think given the way the league, and football's changed really, it is more about kind of set pieces and being a bit more direct and being a bit more physical. And Brentford do that, and they do it well. So I think he was kind of the right guy at the right time. There's a lot of teams now playing that way, not least Arsenal. So maybe we do need to adapt a little bit ourselves.
Yeah, the one thing I was going to say, and I find this as an interesting kind of foil to Brentford, is actually Brighton. And I don't know if you guys know about the link between Brentford and Brighton, but you're right, Mark, that Brentford's owner is a self-made gambling statistics genius. His co-founder actually owns Brighton and actually bought Brighton first. And you see the way that Brighton plays, and they do have some of that pragmatism that you're talking about, but they also have room for that expression. You see Yakuba Minte, who can make a lot of things happen. You see Matoma, who can make a lot of things happen. You see Ruder, who can make things happen. Even Gomez this year. I think there's a middle ground to this where clearly set pieces have come back in style and made more of a formalized piece of the game than before. But at the same time, I think there is a whole other world where games can be broken by players still. And I think that's really where we get that change there. And I think it's interesting to note because Brighton is the one that's made Europe, and Brighton is still within that kind of gap of all of those teams in and around a shout for Europe right now.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that's where we should end it. I mean, like you guys said, we're still in the shout for Europe. I imagine who else? Everton, Bournemouth, obviously Brentford, Brighton. Who do you think realistically gets the Europa League spots in the Conference League? Because I wish, like I said, I'm always a deluded guy, but I'm not seeing it. Zero goals from 4 of the 5 matches. Like, we would be limping into Europe. It would just be weird. And I want us to get into Europe, even if we get knocked out of the first stage. At least, hopefully, the Khans spend more. But I don't see it being us. What do you guys think? Whoever wants to take it first, go for it.
Quick piece of trivia for both of you. Who has more wins in the last 5 games, Brentford or Fulham?
I think it's us, isn't it? I think they've drawn the last 5.
Oh,
So when Mark talks about limping into Europe, Brentford doing their best work on that. So, by the way, who has more wins in their last 5? Chelsea or
It looks like Bournemouth are in the form team and having a real push. They're unbeaten in 12, aren't they? Which is pretty impressive.
Wow.
We've still got to play them too, so that'd be interesting. And yeah, look, I think Everton are a good strong side. They've got a chance. Brighton always have a chance. But, unfortunately, Brentford are there, but as Mike says, they're slipping away. I don't see us doing it. I'm just not seeing enough from us at the moment to suggest that we're going to be in the picture. And I do worry that the Conference League is a poison chalice anyway. I think if you can make Europa, fantastic, but I'm not sure the Khans would be able to spend more if we went into the Conference League because we'd have tougher SCR limitations and no income to offset it because the competition doesn't generate any income. So that could be a real poison chalice for us, financially and potentially on the pitch too. So But Europa League, sorry, would be amazing. But I just don't. Number one, I don't think we're ready. And number two, I'm not seeing enough from the team to suggest that we're even in that conversation at the moment, despite what the league table tells us.
My short answer is I think Bournemouth and Brighton are the two who make it in. I don't know what the order is. I'm not happy that I'm saying it. But you look at the form, you look at the way that they're playing. Those are the two that kind of stick out to me. I think Sunderland is a red herring. I think we're a bit of kind of, we're just hanging on in there and we're still doing enough. I was unimpressed with Everton over the weekend, so I'm going to go with Bournemouth and Brighton.
Those feel like very sensible choices and quite likely to happen. And with that, we've somehow done 65 minutes on the worst game of football I've ever seen. Thankfully, we spent over half of it talking about much more interesting stuff. But good grief, I am glad I am not going to the GTEC again anytime soon, and hopefully I don't have to watch that again. But I want to give a big thank you to our transatlantic cousin, Mike. We kept pulling him in, pushing him out, pulling him in, pushing him out, flip-flopping, as he said, is the American vernacular. But he showed up in the end, just like America always does and hopefully continues to do. Thank you so much, Mike.
Every time I think I'm out, they pull me back in.
And of course, it just wouldn't be the same without Dave, the man who always has to rebut my every claim with a slight look of indignation on his face, but we love him, really. Thank you, Dave.
Yeah, no worries, Mark. And just a quick shout out as well. We've been putting up some really, really good write-ups recently, a financial one, which got a lot of traction. Kieran Maguire commented. That was pretty cool. But also we did one after the Brentford game, and there was some polls on there. So if you haven't seen it already, jump on and have a look. I think the Discord and the poll within our write-up both agreed that Bernd Leno was man of the match on Saturday. He saved us an embarrassing defeat to the Bus Stop Boys. I think it was unanimous as well that, you know, I think the score, I think the public gave the team as a 4 out of 10. I don't think we're going to get any arguments there. And interesting that Jack put a little
lower.
Well, it could have been. You're welcome to go on there and bring that vote down if you want to, Mike. I'm just giving you the current stats. And then the last point was, this is quite interesting. Jack said biggest concern heading into the run-in: the goal drought, Iwobi's fitness, overall second half dip in form, or transfer window planning. And the biggest concern was the goal drought at 60%, which I think we've talked about. So glad we're speaking about the right things.
No, we missed Marco's contract. Where's Marco's contract in there?
Well, there you go. There you go. So an oversight by Jack, you know. Send your complaints in now.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for listening. And I'll see us off with a UI.